So it's all for play for still.
I think so. Do you want to bet against us?
Hello, Aston Villa fans, and welcome again to For the Love of Paul McGrath podcast. I've probably spent most of the morning with you, but hopefully I haven't taken up too much of your time. But look, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to talk to one of my favorite people, if not my favorite people, to read on Twitter and to read articles with regards to football and Aston Villa in general. The wonderful Matt Law is joining us today, and as I've titled this one, "The Big Olly Watkins Loving." Is what I titled this one. A bit provocative of a title, I think, but I'm allowed one clickbaity title every year, I think.
You're going to get me a restraining order. I cover England for the Telegraph as well, so I have to interview Ollie sometimes, and they're not going to let me within 100 yards of him at this rate, are they?
Well, do you know what? That's absolutely brilliant because, I'll be honest, I wanted somebody to match my... I'm the self-professed conductor of the Olly Watkins fan bus. I stamp the tickets, and I'm unashamedly that way. But I think it's very, very seldom that we get to live in an era whereby records are broken, and we're breaking records almost weekly or bi-weekly at the moment. But to have the goal record broken, I think it's worth putting an exclamation mark on the side of that with regards to Olly Watkins, because we've obviously spoken about it in our pre-match stuff, our post-match stuff, and pre-match and everything. But talk to me about Olly Watkins, you having that knowledge of him. The man himself, he comes across as being very, very humble person, but also a very self-driven person. You've interviewed him a couple of times. Would that be right?
I mean, look, you describe it quite rightly. I mean, the last interview I'd have done with him, sort of major interview, would have been at the Euros in Germany last year, where a group of about 7 of us sat down with him for about an hour. And it was during the Euros, and it was a funny time because he'd maybe got on as a sub a couple of times, but always interviewing the deputy to Harry Kane with England is an odd experience because you kind of go into it thinking, why are we interviewing this guy? He's not going to get on the pitch, he's not going to do anything, because Harry plays every single England game, usually every single minute. But it was a really, really fascinating interview. He spoke so honestly. He is very humble. He spoke about the fact that he used to have an imposter syndrome, which he still actually, I wouldn't say struggles with, but is still there with him. He certainly carried it when he first joined Villa. And he has worked with a psychologist before, and I think probably continues to work with a psychologist. And he does have and has had this self-doubt with him in the past of not being quite as good as everybody else thinks he is. And that's been clear as well. I mean, he's very hard on himself. If he scores 2 goals, he'll often talk about the fact he should have scored 3 goals. I remember when Villa beat Liverpool 7-2 and he scored his hat-trick. And he did an interview after that talking about the goals he'd missed. And that's kind of how he is. And I think Villa and people around him have tried to work on him successfully to a point to let some of that baggage go, and to focus more on the positives and not dwell on the chances missed. He's also talked before about he used to be in games, and if he missed a chance, it would kill him for a long time in a game, and it'd disappear out the game. And he's got rid of that. He's worked so hard on all of that. But also, it's a funny one because you've got this guy who's very humble and has talked about some of the psychological issues he's had with being a top striker. And yet, you're right, he's incredibly driven. In that same interview, he spoke passionately about the fact he wasn't happy with being a sub. He wasn't happy with just going to Germany. He wasn't happy about being Harry Kane's deputy. And he wasn't happy with being a sub. And he wasn't particularly having a brilliant time in Germany. You just thought this guy'd be delighted to be here. And, if you're Harry Kane's deputy, what kind of expectations do you come with? And yet, that drive became so evident because, a few days later, we're all there for that Holland match, and he comes off the bench and he provides one of the greatest moments of England football I've been part of. to score that goal. I was struggling. You try and be professional in press boxes and not celebrate, and I really had to hold it together. I really did. But he produced that moment, and you thought back to that interview, and you thought, fair play to you. You've been ready to grasp your moment and give Southgate a real problem with his decision then. And then ongoing, he did actually force his way in ahead of Kane in Carsley's last couple of games as interim manager. So that determination shone through. So, that's my experience of having spoken to Ollie, and it's two very different sides to him.
It's very interesting you mentioned about the psychological approach he takes to the game, obviously, working with a psychologist. And, it actually beggars belief in my mind that every single player, the clubs don't have multiple sports psychologists employed at the moment, because no matter how much you want to put your head under the duvet after having a game whereby you miss 2 or 3 chances and you hope that it goes away, Twitter is pinging on your phone all the time. And even, the mental strength that it takes to not, I would imagine that if you're a famous footballer, the mental strength it takes not to Google your own name at times must be absolutely incredible.
Well, another interview I did with Ollie, we actually spoke to him this was last season when he was really ripping it up, right in the middle of his fantastic form. And then he spoke about the fact that he didn't think he got the praise that maybe we thought he deserved, sort of in the wider non-Villa world, because he didn't really engage in self-PR on Instagram too much, on X as it now is too much, that he liked to leave all that side of it alone. He didn't like to blow his own trumpet. Now, since then, actually, I've noticed that he does a little bit more around his socials, or certainly his team do a little bit more around his socials. But again, it was clear that he really wasn't interested in that PR side of football, that he wanted to do everything possible to just concentrate on his game.
And that, once again, that all rings true. You just have to see, yes, I know Villa suffered a crushing loss to Crystal Palace. And I think that night, himself and Rashford were at the boxing match in London. That got a bit of blowback from fans. All this taking into account, I suppose, really, once again, you've got to think of the human factor of a player at any time. Yes, and you will have a certain portion of the fan base, and at times I've probably been guilty of it, that says, I'm entitled to ask for more of him. I pay his wages, and that's fine. I will not query or quarrel with anybody over that. But there's a human person underneath jersey as well at the same time. And when you talk about psychological effects, that is huge. I'm delighted that he is employing one, because I'm a big believer in it. I've seen too many sports teams fail to reach the pinnacle or the zenith of their abilities because they've neglected that side of the game. I'm going to bring this completely Ireland-centric at the moment, but I'm from a place called Limerick originally, very big hurling stronghold, couldn't win an All-Ireland hurling championship, which would be like the FA Cup of hurling. They employed a sports psychologist called Caroline Currid, who had a brilliant track record of doing this in professional teams and non-professional teams, and they won 5 of the next 6. It's so big to have that self-belief, and I'm delighted that our striker has that, because there is a lot expected of him. Sometimes maybe I give him a lot of passes and everything like that. I don't apologize for it. But some other people are a lot harder on him. And I'm delighted that he has that support in the background, and it's part of his professional regime, and just shows how professional he is.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like doing the interview with him last summer that it was something he used more in the past to get him to this point. I suspect now, and I'm guessing a little bit here and working sort of between the lines of how he was talking, I suspect now that the support is there if he feels he wants to use it now. I feel like the regular support was something maybe in the past to actually help him to get to where he is now. But yeah, for sure. I mean, Tyrone Mings is another one who's used a psychologist. Like, some players love it. It's not for other players. That's why I think clubs do make it available, but a lot of clubs don't sort of hammer their players with it, because some players just won't entertain it, and that's fair enough too.
I couldn't imagine Roy Keane sitting down with a sports psychologist. Yeah, I could imagine that could go south very, very quickly. But you mentioned, I suppose, you mentioned that he had that imposter syndrome as well. I thought that was interesting because, by everybody that knows him, when he signed for Aston Villa, I suppose, signing again for Dean Smith, getting to play with Dean Smith, but also getting to really realise his dream of playing in the Premier League, Western Supermare to Exeter. obviously overperformed the level of play he was playing at Weston-super-Mare, the competition he was in. Goes to Exeter, overperforms that. Goes to Brentford, overperforms that, and gets his move to a Premier League team. I don't think much is kind of mentioned about that rise through the ranks that he's had, but he was delighted to sign for Villa. And I can't remember what podcast. I think it was Greg Evans and Dan Bardella I was listening to, and that's what they said. And I love that. The player, he was so delighted to sign for Villa, and then fast forward 5 years later, he's the bloody record goal scorer.
Well, let's not forget as well that when Ollie signed for Villa was a striker's graveyard. I mean, you know, Jonathan Codger had done well, albeit in the Championship, and Tammy Abraham had done well on loan. But the amount of strikers Villa had seen come and go over a period of time, it was one every 6 or 7 who did well. You know, Benteke did well, but you know, it was always this gap of struggling. And I remember speaking to someone who said that, you know, you could see with some strikers they would sign for Villa. I think it might have been said in relation to Scott Hogan, but apologies if I'm wrong on that. But they said you could see with some strikers that when they signed at Villa, they would come and they would look at the Holt end, and you could see them shrivel up. Basically, it would eat them up. They hadn't realised the size of the club they were joining. They hadn't realised the size of the support, and they hadn't just realised the size of trying to play in front of that Holt end. And not all players can do it. And like I say, Olly Watkins wasn't joining the club with this grand tradition of strikers coming in and doing brilliantly. We'd spent a lot of money on the McCormacks, the Hogans, all sorts of this world. I mean, going back into my, you know, Cascarinos, all kinds of people who couldn't do it at Villa. So, you know, that for someone with from Brentford, where he was a star, you know, a relatively small club, doing it straight away at Villa with the weight of expectation on him was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
And you know, we were 6 years removed from Grant Holt being a striker for Aston Villa. Now, no offense to Grant Holt, but we were 6 years removed from that caliber of striker, Libor Kozak, Grant Holt, and so on. So you absolutely are right, and which is strange because, you know, you go back to the years of Saunders, Atkinson, York, even Tommy Johnson, you know, all those guys. You were guaranteed goals at Villa Park, and then there was this big barren period. You know, this huge big barren period. You know, so it's and then obviously Ollie Watkins comes along.
And Watkins had a weight of a transfer fee as well. I mean, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it might have been Villa's record fee at the time. I can't remember that. So, but if it wasn't the record fee, it was up there. There were a lot of commentators and a lot of pundits and media questioning the fee. I remember that, whether the fee was too big for someone like Watkins, because Villa had to go high on it. Dean Smith really pushed the club on that. I know that for sure. And yeah, it's not easy coming in with that weight of expectation, with that fee on your shoulders as well. That's like I say, he's just done incredibly well.
And once again, actually, you know, that's Gabriel Bonheur comes in as the local hero,
Exactly.
wanting to play for the club and everything, you know, and yes, I thought it was great to have him up there. Some, you know, polarizing to some fans. That's fine. Once again, I don't tell anybody how to be a fan of anything. Everybody's opinion is as valid as anyone else's. But to have a homegrown hero, a homegrown kid, as your top scorer, albeit a lot of other clubs look and go, what? It's only 74 goals. Doesn't bother me. But now it's being usurped by somebody who had that weight of a transfer fee. Once again, it goes to the mental fortitude of the man that is Olly Watkins. I did a piece, or I was looking more, I suppose, into what Olly Watkins has become now, and I mentioned that Weston-super-Mare to Exeter to Brentford. Then at Brentford, he then goes from being a winger to being a striker, adapts his game. Comes into the Premier League, obviously under Dean Smith, then has that time under Steven Gerrard, and then Unai Emery comes in. And since Unai Emery has come in, he's adapted again. 43.3% of all his career assists have come in the last 18 months, last 24 months. Talk to me about, I suppose, how you find that adaptation that he's had, and how pivotal, I suppose, that has been to this Aston Villa team. Have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, his progression as a player has been really stark. I mean, for instance, he's never been a great holder up of the ball, but I think he has improved at that. He clearly works and works and works at his game. And when Unai Emery came in, he clearly saw a player he could slightly adapt and change slightly to make him more productive. He wanted him. He sort of seemed to want him around the goal, doing a lot of work around the goal. Smarter way. I find it quite hard to put into words, but his work is used a lot smart. He was always a hard-working striker, but it feels like Unai has channeled that work into areas where he can really impact matches, whether it be assists or goals, because his numbers have shot up. So rather than just constantly running down different flanks or the left flank a lot, he will still make those runs, but he'll make them in a far more impactful way that's got an end product to it, rather than just running them and sort of wearing himself out for no reason. So I've seen a change in him in that. I think he's all round an absolutely incredible player. I saw a stat the other day that Ian Taylor had put up on X that since 2022-23, Europe's top 5 leagues, there's a list of players with 50 plus goals and 25 plus assists. That list consists of Olly Watkins and Mo Salah. That is it.
Yeah.
That's the end of the list. In top 5 European leagues, that's not just Premier League. I mean, that is astonishing that he's in that kind of company. And even this season, I think people would say he's slightly down on his assists this season from what we're used to. But he's still sort of 7 assists. I mean, if you compare that to other strikers, Haaland's 3 assists, Chris Wood's 3 assists, Isak's 6 assists. He still outscores his contemporaries in that regard, even when a season when we probably think he's a little bit down on his assists.
You're 100% right, and also he had 13 assists last year. If I'm open to correction on this. I think 12 of them came in the league and 1 of them came in the cup competitions. So it's 13 throughout the course of last year. This year he's got 13 in all competitions as well. Yes, he went on that barren streak in the Champions League, but he was providing goals there. He also has 2 goals provided in I think he's 4 assists in the Champions League and 2 in the FA Cup as well. So when we talk about his assists over the course of this season, he's played in more competitions. He's played in higher level competitions, I suppose, in the Champions League. And while the goal output wasn't there, that was maybe there for the Europa League last year, or the Conference League. The assists have been there as well. And you mentioned something else there as well, Matt, about his, that a lot of his adaptation under Unai Emery. There was another stat that came out that I think he's only scored 1 goal outside the box under Unai Emery. Now,
interesting.
Where do you sit on this? Because I know that I'm going to probably get pelters in this, that everybody wants to see people score worldies from outside the box. So do I. We've got players who can do that. You mentioned Mo Salah as well. Mo Salah has gotten the ball from the halfway line, taken it and scored worldies from outside the box. I'm going to argue that it's actually probably more difficult to consistently score goals inside the box, because you have to get space and you're going to be consistently marked and you've got 2 people to get around. So to find space in the box, there's an argument to be made is a bit more difficult. Where do you sit? And I'm throwing this one at you, and I didn't give you any pre-warning of this, but where would you kind of sit on that? Is that me just trying to colour the Olly Watkins tinted glasses? Because the reason I say that is, you look the world over, there's an absolute lack of proper number 9s, traditional proper number 9s that can work the penalty area. And we have one. To replace that, I think is bloody difficult. Some people call it tap-in merchantry. I call it that movement in the box. Alan Shearer isn't giving out about it.
It's rubbish to talk about tap-in merchantry with Ollie anyway. I mean, if you look at his best goals are instinct. His best goals are the goal he scored at Bournemouth, the goal he scored at Southampton the other day, that goal for England against Holland. I mean, they're a long way off being tap-ins. They're inside the box, but they're a long way off being tap-ins. I've actually seen him miss some tap-ins, to be quite honest with you. I prefer him when he's sort of on the angle of the 6-yard box and he's trying to rake it across into the other corner of the net or something like that, or when he just doesn't have to think at all. But look, I mean, different strikers, different forwards do different things, and some of their games are about dribbling from outside the area and backing in. I do think modern football has moved away slightly from goals outside the area towards the percentages, and the percentages tell you that you've got more chance of scoring inside the box. I don't think managers love their teams these days having a lot of shots outside the box. When you see a lot of situations where as a crowd you think shoot, they get frustrated now with teams passing it around a little bit. But that's because they want to work a situation to get the ball in the box, because the percentages are far bigger from scoring. Look at Pep's Man City. They've made an absolute, the last 4 or 5 years under Pep, that dragging it back across the 6-yard box, and whether it be Sterling or someone else scoring, that's how you score goals. I just think you're far more likely to score from in the box than outside the box, and therefore taking a lot of shots outside the box.
Apologies, I think I just had a bit of a lag there, but I heard you there. You were talking about Sterling and the propensity to score from inside the box. And I agree as well. That goal I used to christen, that type of goal that Villa now I actually score as well, to cut back to the penalty spot.
Yeah,
used to christen that the Pro Evolution Soccer goal, because that's how you just run straight down the line, pass it back, and then have somebody run in. So, but look, what if it's not broke, don't fix it. Is my view on that. And with it being a game now of limiting risk, I think that's probably the best way to limit your risk, and Olly Watkins is proving that to be the case for sure. I don't know. Once again, am I cheeky by asking this? A lot of people are asking it in the comments there about saying he nearly left in January. Do you have anything on that, or is there anything that you can share with us on that? Was that actually really as close? And then I know that we had somebody in the footballing fraternity that mentioned the Villa offered him to Arsenal. I've been told that was untrue, that it was always the Duran deal that was being worked on.
Look. I mean, after the event, everyone says different things, so it's always a little bit difficult to get the truth. You're never going to get anyone inside Aston Villa at this point now saying he was offered to Arsenal. Look, my reading of it was he wasn't offered to Arsenal by Villa, put it that way. There was probably a price at which a conversation, or a very serious conversation, could have been had, because for whatever reason Villa made it clear to the market that they wanted to make a big sale in January, and it was going to be one of the strikers, with clearly now we know in hindsight with a view of getting Rashford in on loan. Arsenal got nowhere near the price that Villa would have gone for him, put it that way. I mean, I think Arsenal's offer was around 40 million in the end, if not just shy of 40 million, and it was just dismissed out of hand. Never offered him. Whether he was offered from somebody who's not the club is maybe another conversation. And I do think if Arsenal had been prepared to start talking at 60, obviously that's more close to the Duran level, then it might have got a little bit more serious. But it never really got serious with him, and it was all part of a trading mechanism where Villa clearly felt they had to bring in the money to be able to bring in Rashford and Asensio, which they felt could transform the second half of their season. I mean, I've got to say, Watkins is a guarantee, whereas Duran, you can get brilliance from him, but you don't know what you're going to get from him. And the thought of, in the second half of a season, relying on the gamble that is Duran against the sort of guarantee of Watkins would have filled me with sort of fear, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you in that as well. Don't get me wrong, I've been accused of being a Duran hater. I certainly am not. Like, I called him the best young striker in the world numerous times in our podcast, and I think we've proven right on that. Although he has gone to Saudi, and he's 5 goals and 10 appearances in Saudi and a couple of red cards. But we'll see what his I suppose his love for the game is over the years, and how long he stays there.
His ceiling is huge. I've spoken to a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
Chelsea were very interested in Duran at a time when nobody rated Duran that highly. I've spoken a lot to Chelsea about him, and they always talk about his ceiling. His ceiling is absolutely enormous. What he can go on to be is absolutely enormous, but there's no guarantee there. There's just literally no guarantee there. And I just think it was a brilliant deal by Villa. Whatever Duran goes on to achieve now, me personally, I'm not a Duran hater. I don't see him hitting that ceiling for what I've seen, but let's see. But I think it was a phenomenal deal by Villa.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. You ripped their hand off at that, and you see where it comes. But so that's the Olly Watkins loving. That's the Olly Watkins loving part of the podcast over. Villa obviously have a run in now for the rest of the year. And two teams that are going to be pivotal in that run-in are two teams that you cover for the Telegraph. So I
Yeah.
couldn't think of anybody that is in a better position to discuss these. We're going to go to the luckless. I was going to say relegation threatened, but they can't lose the 16 points that they have now unless there's some financial fair play stuff that comes up. But Spurs, 17th place. I genuinely never thought I'd see it in my lifetime. That Spurs would be that low. Obviously, we've got them this Friday, Matt. Like, Ange Postecoglou looks like he's only got one hand in the reins. Like, what are we to expect this Friday from this Spurs team who have all the players, have even a very good second string, have a very good third string, but just can't seem to get out of their way this season, probably due to the manager in a lot of ways. I don't know. Talk to me more about it.
Yeah, look, I've got to be honest, I don't see this game as the gimme that it's being portrayed as in some places. It frightens me that I've listened to a few things and a few podcasts where this game is almost being treated like a definite 3 points, because I think that their match against Crystal Palace was the throwaway match. I was at that match. They'd just come back from Glimt in Norway. I was in Glimt with them in Norway. And he made 8 changes. They'd got back at 4:30. That game was always the throwaway game. The Villa game is different for them. The Villa game is about trying to get players in a place where they're ready for the final and taking some sort of positive out of the game, whether it be through the result, whether it be through someone like Son getting valuable minutes and scoring a goal to get some confidence going, whether it be through Solanke getting a goal because he's been short of goals. They want to take some sort of positive into that final. I think they will start the game with a strong lineup. I think a lot of their first team regulars will come in to start the game, and it'll be a case of them managing the minutes through the game. So you might see on 60 minutes a lot of subs start happening. And if Villa can be in a commanding position by 60, 70 minutes, then touch wood, I would imagine they'll be okay, because I think at that point, that's when Tottenham's minds will have to start going towards the final. But I don't see them playing a really weak team. I just don't see it. I think they'll play Van de Ven. I think they'll play Romero. I think they'll play Solanke. Son, clearly they want to get minutes into. So it might not be as easy as people think. And I've seen Spurs be awful in the league this season, but I've also seen them be very good in the Europa League. You know, they were excellent away at Eintracht Frankfurt. They did a job on Bodo Glimt home and away. And it just slightly fills me with fear that this isn't the gimme that people think. I'm sure Unai and the team will be well prepared for that. I think they can't possibly think it's going to be an easy match. And I just think we're also at the time of the season, you know, Southampton was meant to be a walkover for Man City. Leicester was meant to be a walkover for Forest. With the pressure that's on at this point of the season, what everyone's playing for, there are just no walkovers. And as you said at the top of your intro to this section, whatever Tottenham have had during the season, they do have good players. They do have some good players. So I think Villa have got to go into it with the attitude of like the Newcastle match. They've got to treat it like the Newcastle match, that they're playing a team who can on their day be a top team. They need all the fire, all the momentum, all the atmosphere, everything behind them, and approach it like that. Not approach it like they're playing a team 17th in the table, because this aren't sort of a team that traditionally would be there. They're not a group of players who traditionally would be there, who Villa should sweep aside. So I'm a little bit nervous. I've got to be honest, I'm a little bit nervous about this game. And listening to people write it off as a definite win just makes me more and more nervous, quite frankly.
And I don't believe a word that comes out of Ange Postecoglou's mouth. You know, he said, "Oh, we're going to wrap them all in cotton wool. We can't." But I don't believe that either.
But also, you've got to take that quote in context. He was actually asked in that quote about the fact that in the build-up to the Champions League final, Maurizio Pochettino had his squad walking over hot coals, and they did this thing where they put arrows to their neck and broke the arrows, and it was all about psychologically preparing them. His response in keeping them cotton wool was a bit of a joke to ask whether he would do stuff like that. He's going to have them training properly. You can't go 2 weeks after a semi-final with not really doing anything and go into a final. You have to have your team prepared. You do risk injury through it. And therefore, they're not going to go in to have their tummies tickled. They're just not. Like I say, that aspect of it might kick in with half an hour or 20 minutes to go. when changes will come and they'll have to step off a little bit, I'd imagine, to protect themselves. But we don't know where the match will be at that point.
Yeah, and so you mean that he's not going to employ the same pickpocket that Arteta employed to pickpocket the Arsenal players? No, he's not going to do that.
He's not into all that. I cover them a lot. I actually like, and they've had a nightmare in the Premier League.
Yeah.
He's different. He's something different from a lot of the managers in the Premier League. He tries to do things differently. I like it. It's not worked for him at all in the league. I think it's going to be difficult for him to keep his job, whatever happens in Europa. But I do actually, I've got a little soft spot for Ange, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. My co-host Paddy has a soft spot for him as well, for what he did, the great stuff he did at Celtic, up north of the border as well. So that's definitely for sure. So that Spurs dealt with, and I think very fair points. Actually, a lot of points I agreed with there as well myself. And the other team that you cover are Chelsea. To me, Chelsea are, and I think to probably everybody listening, Chelsea are the biggest enigma in world football at the moment. The transfer strategies that they have, the fact that they've got I'm going to say a financially brash owner in Todd Bowley, a financially brash one, who comes in here. There's a small cloud around some of their ownership structures and the amount of them and shell companies, and they're pretty much like a little mini Delaware there in the middle of nowhere. Obviously, Delaware has the most registered companies in all of the United States, and it's where you go to set up your company, where you don't want people to know what you're doing. But all that aside, Enzo Maresca has come in and they've been very vocal about, this is our guy. This is the guy that's going to stay for the long haul. We've scouted him for years and years and years. And I just don't believe that with them. I don't believe that they have with him, because they're now in a position where potentially they're going to stutter towards the end of the season. So I suppose what I'm getting at here with my question is, number one, with Chelsea's running, are they stuttering towards the finish line? Will they cross that finish line? And secondly, if they don't, is that all just window dressing that they had with Enzo Maresca, and will they just bin him again?
I missed the first bit of the question because it was freeze. Was Sorry. It just, are they going to get in the Champions League?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so look, they've stuttered since December when they were, when they beat Villa at Stamford Bridge. They were second in the league and people were talking to them as title contenders. They then sort of from January through to about a month ago had a terrible run, absolutely terrible. It looked like they were going to chuck it all away. They are three wins from 4 now. They've come again a little bit. The turnaround at Fulham was a massive moment for them. I think if they'd have lost or drawn that Fulham game, that was them gone out the race.
Yeah.
And it would have all turned pretty toxic, I think. That was an absolute massive turnaround. They got fortunate with the fact that Liverpool came at the time of the season. They came and they beat Liverpool. But they are 3 wins from 4. So even though they've lost at Newcastle, they do have a little bit of momentum behind them. All the pressure is on Chelsea, I think, in this Champions League race. They don't have a shirt. They've got this short-term shirt sponsor, but off the pitch, they've put everything into qualifying for the Champions League. They've held off getting a long-term sponsor because they want to do it with Champions League money to negotiate on that. Their whole sort of business plan around Chelsea revolves about getting in the Champions League. They are a club who before this ownership traditionally were regularly in the Champions League, and I think all the pressure is on them. They've been in the top 4 pretty much all the season until recently when they've fallen out, so that puts a pressure on them. So while Villa have to win both their games, I believe, and that has a pressure of itself, and Forest have had pressure in that they've not been there before, I actually think all the pressure is on Chelsea. And obviously now they have Nicholas Jackson suspended. I think in terms of the manager, I don't think it's as clear cut as if they don't qualify, he will get sacked. I think it will put pressure on him going into next season, but I actually think they will try and stick with him. Certainly for the start of next season, if they just suggest that all the evidence points to them making constant change, because that's what they've done with Potter and Pochettino. But they are worried. Their fans are worried by their next 2 matches. They traditionally over the last 10 years have a terrible record against Man United. They beat them at home last season 4-3 in a crazy match when Cole Palmer scored a hat-trick. If they were to beat them again, they've beaten them at home in consecutive seasons, which, given how bad United have been, is quite something. They are a bogey club for Chelsea, and their fans scenarios that have happened in the past that could happen again. So they're not counting their chickens at all. It'll be a nervy evening for them on Friday night, I think. But they just take it into the last day. And all season I've said I thought Chelsea will finish in the top 5. I've just had a feeling that they would have enough to get them over. I have had my doubts over the last couple of months, but I still think, at the end of the day, if they win 2 matches, they're there because their goal difference is so much better than Villa's. Although I would say, watch for Man City. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that they lose one of their 2 matches. I think there's an outside chance on Man City at the moment. But Chelsea have a lot of pressure on them, and that they simply have to win on Friday. Otherwise, I think a lot of their fans will decide that they've got no chance, and I think the atmosphere will turn bad quite quickly there.
Interesting. Yeah, as you said, Nicholas Jackson being out is huge. I think that
it's
is
huge.
huge. He's stuttered, but
goals wise, he's not been prolific, but they play in a different way with Jackson. He can run the channels for them. Cole Palmer generally plays better with Jackson there because he likes to play off him. They have quite a good little understanding going. He also is just a bit of a creator of chaos for them in the way that he plays. You're never quite sure. A bit like Duran in a way for Villa was. He can do some really daft things and miss some silly chances, but he can really rile up the opposition. He can really rile up the crowd. He can get the crowd going. He can produce something from nothing. I do think he is a big miss for them, and they're going to have to basically play without a striker now. When they were without him before, they played Neto through the middle. They've got a slight other problem facing United as well, in that Jadon Sancho, who came on against Newcastle, can't play against United because they're his parent club because he's on loan. So they can't just bring Sancho in and put Neto through the middle. They have to juggle it around a little bit more than that. So that provides them with another thing to think about. So yeah, it's there are 3 players I think you'd have said at Chelsea that they'd have wanted. You really didn't want injured for the remainder or out for the remainder of the season. They're Caicedo, Palmer, and Jackson, and one of them has done something idiotic and ruled himself out for the rest of the season.
And the other one had about 457 fouls the weekend and couldn't even get yellow carded.
No, I mean, Caicedo is what he is. He's a phenomenal player, though. He gets away with a lot of fouls. He really does, but he is a phenomenal player.
Yeah, brilliant player. I know I said that was going to be the last question. PSR related in 20 words. Are Chelsea going to be are they going to be kind of twiddling at the collar, when it comes to PSR time, or do they have an ace up their sleeve?
Well, they've played it. I think they're okay at the moment. That they're not in desperate need to do something by June the 30th. They could obviously make their position better. They've got look as well. I think it's not Chelsea's fault. This is not me having a go at Chelsea.
Nope.
But I think it's disgraceful that the clubs in the Club World Cup have a get out of jail free card in the money that they will get from the Club World Cup. I mean, that Club World Cup potentially is worth more to Chelsea than the Champions League, and it just shouldn't count on the PSR. That they're being rewarded for something that was achieved, getting on for sort of 4 or 5 years ago. That wasn't even this ownership as well. It's ridiculous that a club can have that in their favour, but it's given them a massive leg up. So with that, and with the sort of sales they've made to themselves, that Villa are now looking at doing. They're okay, but we'll have to look towards the future, and it could rear up its head again for them in the future. But for this summer, they're okay.
Yeah, I'm feverishly every week doing the Euro Millions, so that when I win the Euro Millions, I can then just buy Aston Villa's women's football club for 170 million. Perfect. Job done. Issue solved. At least it won't come from ownership to ownership. I'll do it. I'll take the bullet for that one for sure. Listen, Matt, thank you so much for your time. I know I said 20 minutes at the start, but I'm a talker, and I do apologize for taking almost 40 minutes. It's been an absolute pleasure. I messaged Matt and I said, okay, I've been building up the courage to DM you to come on the podcast for about 6 months now. Today is the day. And that's what I left it at in the DM on Twitter to Matt. And he said, oh, you should have asked me earlier. So thanks so much for your time and for coming on the podcast there.
Thanks
Really
for having me.
it.
Keep up the great work. You're one of 2 or 3 Villa podcasts I always listen to regularly.
Excellent.
You nurse me through the defeats. It's in the defeats I need you all. In the victories, I listen while I'm doing the garden or something nice, and sort of it's there and I'm listening and having a lovely time. But it's when I need some cathartic sort of experience when we've, I still remember a few weeks ago when we lost to Palace, not the Wembley one, but the Selhurst Park one, and I was writing off the season in my head a little bit, and I listened to all of them, and it settled me down a bit. So yeah, thanks for that.
Excellent. You do know Paddy is on the podcast as well. What about this catharsis? You do know how long you get to that.
No, but I need that.
I'm joking.
I need to, but that's part of it. I need to know
it.
other people are feeling as low as I'm feeling at points.
Exactly.
Talk themselves out of it a little bit. That's exactly what I need. I'm a Villa fan living in London. My mum and dad still go on season tickets. I can talk to them about it, but having those voices around it massively helps when things are going bad. And when it's going well, it's lovely, but I don't feel like I need it quite so much. Exactly.
And just for anybody who's going to DM me, I'm obviously joking about Paddy. Myself and Paddy have this beautiful yin and yang, and we both understand it. So it's exactly the way it should be. But Matt, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Keep up the great work at the Telegraph. I always read all your stuff, and any nuggets with Villa are always quadruple checked. Now, quadruple checked, and you can take it as gospel, which is always great to have. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much to everybody for watching and for listening. A lot of people have been messaging me saying, my boss is going to kill me, 2 podcasts in the space of 2 hours. What the hell are you doing to me? I'm going to lose my job. So thanks so much, everybody for that. And once again, Matt, thanks a million for your time as well. So that's going to do it for us today. I won't be coming back for a third one unless we announce we've sold Olly Watkins or something like that in the next half hour. But please enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and stay safe, stay healthy. And all that's left to say is up the Villa.